Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Hockey Writers Roundtable season previews. We are back with another one, and we're almost at the end of all of our teams here. We're at the LA Kings, and I've got Evan Sabourin here from the Hockey Writers, covers the Ducks, but obviously the Kings are right there as well. So thanks, Evan, for coming on.
No problem. I'm excited.
All right, well, let's talk about the Kings and they did make it to the playoffs this past season, but did get eliminated by the Edmonton Oilers, who they met again from the past playoffs. Did made a few changes in the offseason, did add a pretty significant piece in Pierre-Luc Dubois. And, he probably will be the second line center. We'll talk about him. And then really they didn't really add anyone else except maybe Cam Talbot as a backup. They've got some guys they've added through trade deadline. Gavrikov, they re-signed him. So they did really relatively stayed the same, except for that massive second line center that they added. So let's start there and talk about Pierre-Luc Dubois coming in from the Winnipeg Jets. What do you think Dubois will bring to this team? Is he the second line center, or could he actually usurp Kopitar as the top line guy?
Yeah, I still can't see that happening. Kopitar he's the foundation of this team, and he's still highly effective even at his older age, 36. I think PLD is going to fit in great in the second center spot. I think the Kings top six is pretty much set for now with Kopitar, Kempe, and Byfield up top, and then you got PLD on the second line with Fiala and Arthur Kaliev. So the Kings top six is arguably, I'll put them up there, probably one of the best in the division, outside of the Oilers and maybe the Knights. But he's adds a big physical presence. I actually ran into him a couple weeks ago for the Kings 5K, and man, he's a beast. He's a big boy. And I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how he makes it out here, because there's always been these rumors about him having an attitude, and he's still 24. He's been in the league since he was 18. But it's going to be interesting to see how he gels with this Kings team, because it's a deep team of veterans, and there's not going to be a lot of young kids playing out there aside from maybe Brant Clark, and I'm thinking Jordan Spence has a shot, obviously Byfield, but outside of that, I mean, this is a veteran team, and they're built for a win now mode. The Kings are it's going to be a good season, I think, for them, and the expectations are high out here for them.
Yeah, that top six is pretty strong, and even you go into the top nine, you've got Philip Danault, probably the best third line center in the NHL, one of them at least. You got Victor Arvidsson down there. He's a bit of a scorer as well. Overall, this group is really strong in that top nine. Do you have any other storylines you're kind of watching for the Kings, or people should be watching early on in the season here?
Yeah, and you just said it right there. I mean, the Kings' third line is also going to be one of the best, not in the conference as well. When you can put a 30-goal scorer like Arvidsson, who scored 30 goals twice in his career, when you can put that on your third line, shows that you have scoring depth. So I think the Kings, 1 through 9, they're going to be deep, and they're going to be a team that's going to be hard to play against. My biggest concern is from the goalie standpoint. So I don't know if you want to get into that yet, or we can just dig right into it. But I'm a little concerned about the Phoenix Copley. He played in 36 games last year for the Kings, and he hadn't played that many games in his 4 seasons combined for his career. He played more games last year than he's played in his entire career. Korpisalo, obviously they couldn't afford him, lost him to Ottawa. Financially, didn't have the money to go big on a goalie, but that was one of their biggest problems last year. And it's a little concerning to me that they're going to go with some unproven guys. Cam Talbot's a vet, but his best days are behind him. Again, though, we saw Cam Talbot 2 years ago in Minnesota, where he played pretty well behind a good defensive team. Last year, with Ottawa, not so much. Also a poorly defensive team. So it's exciting to see how the Kings are going to go about this goaltending situation tandem. David Rittich is going to be back in the minors. He's nothing but a solid backup. But that's my biggest concern heading into this season. I don't know if I jumped the gun on that part of the story, but that's where my head's at right now with the Kings.
That definitely is the biggest question mark for the Kings, because like you said, Copley's not a proven guy. He played really well stepping in, basically took over Peterson's job. And then, they did think they needed to have someone getting Korpisalo. But yeah, Copley, we'll see how he does. This is probably the cheapest tandem in the NHL for a contending team. It's only 2.5 million between the two of those guys. That's not even as much as some of the starters. These starters making like 6-7 million, and they're only making together 2.5. So yeah, it's a bargain maybe if Copley can actually perform as a starter. That's a really good for 1.5 million. So yeah, definitely a big thing to be watching. Well, we've talked about the goalies there. Let's talk about the defense, which is another pretty strong group. Obviously still led by Drew Doughty. Mikey Anderson's kind of coming to his own now. Gavrikov, who's added at the deadline, like we said before, he's a solid guy. They re-signed him. Matt Roy, Brant Clark is probably going to play now in the full time after like dominating the OHL this past season. What do you think about this defensive group?
Well, the defensive group, I think the biggest concern from a defensive standpoint is they're not going to. This is a defensive shutdown team. You're not going to get a lot of offense out of the defenseman here for the Kings. Mikey Anderson is him and Drew Doughty combined for a pretty good shutdown pair last season in the top pairing. Gavrikov really came into his own with the Kings after struggling with the Blue Jackets, and Matt Roy's also solid defensively. Now that third pairing, Brant Clark, who you just mentioned, the Kings are really excited about him. Offensively, he could end up being the Kings' defensive leading scorer for all I know.
Yeah.
Doughty's regressed a little, but he's still very effective. I'm also really interested in seeing if Jordan Spence gets a shot at making this team. He's more of an offensive defenseman, and this team's going to need some points back there. So Jordan Spence is a guy I'm also really excited about to watch this year.
Yeah, he's a guy that could potentially get into that third pairing. Andres Engeland is slotted there on cap friendly right now, but I'm excited to watch Brant Clark. I want to see if he can he has played in the NHL. It wasn't very many games, but after that season in the OHL, he was producing like a forward, and that's just insane what he was doing. And we'll see if he can do I don't know if he's probably not going to dominate like that in the NHL, but he could be, like you said, defensive leading scorer. So we'll see what happens with Clark for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we talked about the goaltending, so we don't have to do that again. Now looking at the specific division, they were at the top tier. They're probably still there with the Golden Knights and the Edmonton Oilers. Do you still see them in that those three? Are they the three powers in the Pacific right now?
Yeah, and I think so. The Kraken might be up there as well, but like I said, this team's built to win for now. I wouldn't be surprised if they're competing with Vegas and Edmonton for the division title. Like I said, they're top six. I'll put them up against anybody. You're going to see a lot. I think they're going to see a lot more scoring this year. I think pairing up Dubois with Fiala could be really entertaining. It's going to be a good season. I think looking at a lot at Quentin Byfield. This is a big year for him. The number 2 pick in the draft a couple of years ago. He's got a lot to live up to, especially when you consider that the Kings passed on Tim Stützle for Byfield. So him playing on the top lines is going to be a big year for him. I think he's going to develop. People I've talked to with the Kings have told me that he's only 21 and he has a big wiry frame. His body still hasn't filled out yet, and you can kind of tell that in his draft year if you watched him play. That this kid's got to put a little more meat on the bone. Especially he's a big dude. But I'm excited to see how he develops with on the top line, and it's exciting time for that.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be fun to see how they kind of fight with those three, those other two teams, because it's going to be a tough. Pacific Division, there's some interesting teams in there too that that could be bouncing back, like the Calgary Flames, Vancouver Canucks. even the Anaheim Ducks. I mean, they're an up and coming young team that could surprise some people this season. And we know the rivalry between the Kings and the Ducks because of their proximity to each other. But I think that could turn into a bigger rivalry again if the young, all this kind of falls into place. Obviously, the Kings are way ahead in development wise with their team, but I think this could end up being a really good competitive. The rivalry may be ignited again, right? So we'll see.
Yeah, I think the Ducks are probably a year or two away, and they got to figure out this whole Zegras and Drysdale
Yeah.
situation. I can't believe it's lingered this long, but no, I mean the Kings are in a tough division, but again, they're built for it.
Mhm.
I think they run into Edmonton again. We're going to see a different series.
Yeah.
The Kings will make the playoffs. I'm quite sure of that. But yeah, I mean they're looking like a good team. I'm really excited to see how they play this year.
For sure. All right, well, let's get to our quick fire round. And so if you have watched these season previews before, these are all fun questions we like to ask here. So let's start with our 1 or 2 breakout stars for the Kings.
I'm hoping it's Byfield.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much speculation about when this guy came into the league with, like I said, as the number 2 pick, and he's a big guy. We've seen him dominate in the juniors, in the OHL. This guy's he's going to have the opportunity, and they're going to put him on that top line and let him go. So, like I said, 21 years old, still a kid. He's still got plenty of time to develop. But I think this is the year that we get to see him take that big next step.
Yeah, I think so too. And he's a ton of potential. Hopefully, this is the season he'll start to realize it. All right, a player that needs to bounce back from last season. There was a lot of players that had good seasons, but you got someone that needs to bounce back.
Can I go prospect on that?
Yeah.
I'd really like to see Alex Turcotte develop.
Yeah.
It's got to be frustrating for the Kings that he's drafted 5th overall in 2019, and also another pick where the Kings selected him 1 pick in front of Mo Sider. So I can't help but bash on my Kings buddies that it could have had Stutzla and Sider.
Yeah.
They had the German connection, and where would they be right now if they had those 2 guys?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Turcotte, he's battled injuries as well, but it's kind of been a frustrating start for his career. Hoping to see something out of him. Haven't seen much yet of him out of training camp, but yeah, he's someone that they need to keep an eye on, because when you're picked that high and it's even 4 years later we haven't seen much. It's time to be a little concerned.
Yeah, those injuries have kind of stunted his development a bit, but yeah, it'd be great for him to start showing a bit of that potentially why he was drafted 5th overall, right? So, okay, an X factor for this season.
I think that we've already talked about is Brandt Clarke. I mean, what he can bring to the blue line. He was a top pick, and he's a guy that they're counting on. He's their best defensive prospect, and they're going to throw him into the fire this year. And I think he's going to do well. He looks composed. I watched a few games with him this season, preseason. He's a big part of their future. And so far he's played well. He's played well in the preseason. I could see him end up quarterback in the number 2 power play. He's gonna play a lot of minutes, I think, this year. And yeah, we're gonna see something big out of him, I hope.
We've mentioned already, I like Brandt Clarke. I hope he does too. And I think he could potentially be a top pairing guy down the road, which, it'd be great to take over for Drew Doughty, who big shoes to fill, but I think he could be that guy too. Okay, a rookie or prospect that could surprise, make the roster of training camp. Now, there's not a lot of spots in this team for these guys, but who could do it?
I talked about Jordan Spence. I've also thought about Tyler Madden. I watched Akil Thomas the other night put up 3 goals. That's another guy who was a pretty good prospect, but he was also just battled injuries after he was drafted. He had a hat trick the other night against the Knights. Tyler Madden scored the OT winner. He's always had the offensive potential. He's starting to blossom a little more. Some of these guys take longer. It just takes longer, and people aren't as patient nowadays like this. But Madden could, and again, Jordan Spence. I really like what he brings, especially offensively. And with the Kings not having a lot of not going to be getting a lot of points from the back end, he could be someone that, maybe could make the team as a seventh defenseman. But I think they'd rather have him develop, stay with the Reign. But it'd be interesting to see. He's a good player.
Yeah. Those two definitely good choices. I followed Tyler Madden throughout because he was drafted by the Canucks way back, and I didn't like that they traded him. And but yeah, he has a lot of potential. We'll see what he can do.
He's offensively gifted. He's a creative, hardworking player. It'll be interesting to see. I think he'll see some games with LA this year. I don't know if he'll start the season, but maybe. Injuries happen, and they happen a lot. So
for sure. So he could definitely get a chance. All right, a prospect to watch. Now they do have some good guys around, a few that are pushing for spots, but who should everyone be watching this season?
That's, again, I feel like I'm a broken record here though, but I really want to see what the guys like the three guys we just talked about.
Yeah.
Tyler Madden and Akil Thomas. The Kings haven't had a lot of first round draft picks the past few seasons outside of, Byfield. They traded him away for Fiala. So yeah, I think Turcotte's the guy that I really want to watch this year to see if he, if his game grows, because there's a lot expected from you when you're the 5th overall pick.
Yeah. Another guy I'll be watching is Francesco Pinelli. I really like him too. Very offensively skilled. I don't know where he'll fit in the lineup moving, but he's only 20. So, there's still a lot of time for him, but definitely watch him. Okay. Who will lead the team in scoring on forwards and defense? There could be a few this on the forward group. Defense is probably pretty obvious, but who do you got?
Yeah. You got to go with Kempe. This kid's he's a sniper.
Yeah.
We're talking a 40-goal scorer here. The Kings don't have a lot of guys who are going to put up like 30, 35 goals, but when Kempe hit 40, that was pretty impressive. And he's just, he's in his prime right now. And with this team, the way it's set up, and he's going to score a lot of goals this season. I wouldn't be surprised to see him hit 40 plus this year again. Especially with that top 6 in their power play.
Yeah.
He's gonna have a good season. I can already tell.
And you got Drew Doughty leading the defense, or is someone else gonna?
Like I said, man, there's not a lot of offense coming from this team on the back end. So yeah, Doughty's still gonna be their guy. He still had 52 points last season.
Yeah,
which is pretty good. But hey, what if we see Brant Clark? I don't know. Outside of that, you're not getting points out of Mikey Anderson. You're not going to get a lot of points out of Gavrikov, Matt Roy, Andreas Englund. So really your offensive defensemen boil down to Doughty and Clark. And, unless Spence comes up at some point and he adds a little offense, but they're a defensive shutdown team, and that's what they're going to do. And they got big boys on the back end. They saw how Vegas won it last year with, some tough big blue liners, and hey, it's the recipe for success nowadays in the NHL.
This next question, a lot of contending teams are probably not going to be trading guys away, but do you see anyone being traded this season before the deadline, or are they going to be adding more than removing?
I think they're definitely going to be adding, and we've talked about with the goaltending situation. I think that come April or March or April, if these goalies aren't working out, I could see someone grabbing Cam Talbot as a, insurance depth heading into the playoffs, but yeah, I can see him going after a goalie. I think that's going to end up being what it's being. I have no faith in Phoenix Copley and Cam Talbot, especially when this, like I said, this team's it's a win now team, and they're going to need somebody, and I still think, and it might be a pipe dream, but John Gibson at some point. I don't know that he fits the timeline in Anaheim with those young kids. I know we talked about this before, and he's only 30 years old. They do have Lucas Dostal in the system. Gibson's contract is, a little over $4 million, I believe. I'd love to see him in LA, what he could do with this defensive team. He got lit up last year with the Ducks, franchise worst defense. And yeah, I really think at some point that they're, if they're at the top there and they need something and these goalies aren't working out, that's the guy I would shoot for.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think Gibson will probably do really well in LA because, with a really good defense in front of him. He really hasn't had that in his career, right? Maybe one time. I don't know.
Yeah, it's frustrating for him, but I was at Ducks camp last week and I was basically followed him around a lot, him and Leo Carlson, and yeah, he looked happy, man. He was out there having a good time. Ducks are up and young and upcoming team, but I don't know. I mean, it would be great to see the Kings do something like that because I'd love to see Gibson on a really good team.
Yeah. All right, last question. Bold prediction or a hot take for this season for the Kings.
My bold prediction is they could win the division. I do think they could win the division. They lose to Dallas in the conference finals.
Yeah, I definitely could see that because the Stars they're really good. I did the preview the other day and they're a deep team. Like that's just going to be a team that I think it's going to be really hard to bet against doing that. But yeah, that's a good one.
Well, I'll tell you this too. It's like I can't, after 2012 and what the Kings did, I can never count them out. I was at game 6 or game 3 against the Canucks, and then they came all the way back, and then they went on to win the cup. So I can't count this organization out because I've seen it before.
Yeah.
They're a good team. They're a solid organization, and then too, they're also one of the best teams at drafting and developing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think this could be a good season. We all know that it boils down to there's major injuries, goalies, situations not working out. A lot can happen between now and the trade deadline. But again, I just don't trust those goalies. I don't trust them. I don't know. I just can't.
Yeah, it's the biggest question mark definitely for the Kings going into this season. So we'll see one of them answers it in a positive way. And I just have to wait and see. But thanks, Evan, for coming on the show and stepping in for the Kings here and talking about them for this season. Make sure you're checking out the hockeywriters.com all throughout the season. We'll probably have people stepping in, writing articles for the Kings throughout. I know there's a couple prospect articles for the top prospects that the Kings have, so definitely check those out. But keep following us here, and we've got a few more season previews coming out before the regular season starts. Once that is going, we've got coverage throughout the season, so keep it locked here. Give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, and until next time, we'll see you on another episode of the Hockey Writers Roundtable.